Hi, my name is Jay and I am an online artist, and today I decided to tackle something I've been wanting to do for a long time, and that is making my own D&D character. Dungeons & Dragons is an amazing role-playing game where you can make your own character and put them into campaigns, and it's basically calling my name. I love to make a character. Now, I've had a character floating around for a few years, and by that I genuinely mean 2 sketches of a floating head, and that's it. This was my character named Rune, and while I've always had ideas for him, I never fleshed him out or gave him a character sheet at all. Before I did anything, of course, I had to get some inspiration, so I went to every artist lurking spot, Pinterest.com. This was the board I had for all my ideas that I wanted to put into Rune's design, and while it's helpful, nothing beats actually sitting down and putting your thoughts onto canvas, so that's what I did. I started out with just Rune's head. This is what I've always wanted him to look like. I just didn't have the skills for it, so he ended up looking like a baby in the other ones. Then I added all the pictures that I liked the most from the board and wrote down what importance they had. I wanted Rune to have a lot of nature elements and wolf motifs as a character. Long, uncut hair, naturally made items that he would have carved himself, and overall an earthy vibe. We'll get into more of his lore later, but this was a good starting point. After this, I decided I wanted to do a first pass type of character sheet to get all of the ideas I had fresh in my head down into something I could work with. And to do this, I had to draw a body type for Rune, and I picture him. Rune's a big dude. That's a big dude, okay? And I draw emo twinks for a portion of my living. This is so far out of my stratosphere, I didn't know what was going on. So it took a really long time, and I eventually ended up with this as a little base. Alright, so we're starting off with the very first character sheet. I put some of the pictures I found on Pinterest that I knew I wanted to put in his, base design. So that's what they're doing there for a little reference. Rune has a lot of inspiration, and I will say, for starters, I love Dungeons & Dragons. I love everything about it. And I've tried to learn everything I can about the story and everything, but one thing about me, I am a complete recluse, which means I don't play actual campaigns in a group of people because I would rather die than have that much social interaction and have to act all that out in front of people. But I do love Baldur's Gate and everything like that, so my knowledge on how the game actually works is minimal, but I just want to draw a little elfish, outdoorsy character. As far as Rune goes, I knew for a fact I wanted to base him off of some sort of animal. I know that in my head, Rune probably spent a lot of his time growing up with a tribe in the forest. He's kind of unadjusted, he's very shy. I wanted definitely to make a gentle giant type of character, so that was my main inspiration going into this. So the very first thing I did is I gave him this little cloak hood thing that had wolf ears at the very beginning, and I was looking at references while I was doing all of this, and I gave him some furry armbands. I expect that the winters in the woods are pretty cold, so he has to be prepared. This idea slowly formed into the entire hood just being a wolf, hide head type of thing. And it added more lore. I pictured him having, known a wolf when he was younger, since he didn't like talking to people that much. He preferred to talk to animals. And when that wolf eventually died, he just decided to wear the fur. So it's not like a hunter thing, it's more like a symbol of appreciation for this animal, and he wears it around his head now to keep himself warm. It was fun to draw this type of stuff because I'm not really used to it, and so I was drawing all these outdoorsy clothes type of thing, which is not what I normally do at all. I'm used to drawing emo creepypasta characters, so it was fun to branch out. I also started adding onto the cloak, making it warmer, kind of having it an off-the-shoulder type of thing. I don't picture Rune as a sneaky tiefling type of character or a rogue. I picture him as an elf, and I picture him as a sorcerer, and I think he would keep to himself. When I thought of him when I was a couple years younger, I thought about this massive, giant, scary dude, but he's actually very sweet and very caring and very kind and selectively mute. He's very anxious about certain things. I just kind of let my ideas run while I was doing this and just kept adding little lines. He has a whole little cloak thing going on, and I wanted it to just kind of show that he grew up in the woods and he had to survive off of what he had. So everything in his outfit is based off of things that he could have found, things that he could have made. It's just kind of a homemade type of feel. In the world of Dungeons & Dragons, obviously typical race isn't really a thing. It's more of magical beasts and beings. But obviously I have to mention that a lot of Rune's design probably draws back to Viking or Native American culture. So I obviously kept that in mind. I think if I was drawing Rune outside of a Dungeons & Dragons sort of thing, he would definitely be like a native character. I gave him some necklaces and just a couple of things covering his waist. When I see Dungeons and Dragons characters designs, I often see that more is more, not less is more is better. So I just kept adding detail after detail, and then I got down to his legs and I was like, I think Rune would have these like massive boots that can get him through any type of weather, so that was my idea for that. I don't draw shoes that often, so it's always fun when I get to. I do have a very cartoony style, but I think it translates pretty well with what I'm trying to do. And for this first character sheet, I wasn't trying to do anything insanely fancy, so the detail was very minimal and I just kept it simple. And then I put in him some baggy jeans. Rune, I feel like, is the type of character that has one article of clothing that he's loved for so long and never changes ever. I added some of those little simple tools from my previous little reference sheet of the homemade like bone knives. And then I went on to drawing his face. You don't get to see his beautiful hair here, but it's okay, because I think the little wolf motif is a little bit better. I picture Rune as a pretty solitary, kind of gentle character that doesn't talk to people that much, and I think a wolf really embodies that. And they normally run in packs, and I think that runs into his like coming from a tribe type of lore. I'm going to get more into his actual story later on in the second character sheet, but for now, I'm just kind of explaining Rune as a character and what all of his design details mean. His expression is always pretty neutral, and I did that on purpose. I think Rune wouldn't come off as being very anxious about anything, but also very quiet and just kind of unsure of how he should react to certain situations. Then I added my flat colors, played around with it a little bit. I decided to make his like little wolf symbolism a black wolf because one, they're my favorite, and two, I think it matches the like lonely, darker energy he has going on. I finished up his shading and added this scar that I had been playing around with that I'll get more into, and that was the first pass basically done. Next up, I wanted to focus on little details that Rune had that you couldn't really see under all of that baggy clothing, so I drew in his hair for starters so people could see it, and with his hair, I added a couple extra tufts that kind of still made it look like a wolf silhouette, so with the addition of his little half bun and then this extra floof, it kind of looks like the same sort of vibe with ears. And then I added some tattoos. I put dark blacked out tattoos on his hands to symbolize the sorcerer aspect of him, how he just wields magic. And I added a paw print on his chest because it just seemed like something he would have, and it ties back into the whole wolf thing. Covered him up with a loincloth because no one's trying to look at all of that. I added my flat colors and went in with my shading. And after the shading, I added in this scar that he has running down his entire like right side of his body. I couldn't tell you exactly where this scar came from, but I know that it was probably due to some sort of magic accident. He got hit with a spell that didn't sit quite right on his skin, and it has turned into this huge glowing scar over time. And continuing with that theme, I also added some white streaks into his hair because I assume that the little spell mishap hit his scalp also and changed the way that his hair grows, so some of his streaks are white. I also gave him these earthy green eyes to just kind of fit his whole thing. He's always had green eyes in my head and I didn't want to change it. I added a couple more things. I put his headshot from the last reference sheet, and then I made this like little spell book thing with a reference and started just coloring it in. It was a quick idea. I'll probably go more in depth to it, but he is a sorcerer. I do picture him having a little spell book with maybe secret spells from his tribe. I put this little glowing green orb on it and put the little book cuff ends as little like pieces of wood, if that made any sense. And this was the final design for the first reference sheet. I think it's a good base going forward, and I have an idea of really the type of energy that Rune is bringing. Alright, here's where I really start cooking. It's day 2 of drawing him, so I have a fresh brain, fresh mind to be drawing all of this. And I decided for his second and final character sheet, I just wanted to do a bunch of illustrations that show more Rune as a character and less a concept, because the last one was just sort of putting my ideas down from Pinterest and kind of creating a character, but there's not much personality there. But for the last pivotal step in making a character, I wanted to give him sort of a sheet of his own. And that leads us to our very first illustration of the character sheet. And I do want to explain Rune's personality a little bit because I haven't gotten a chance to up to this point. So, who is Rune as a character? First and foremost, with all of his sort of nature-y inspiration that went into his design, very natural made, I picture him being a wood elf sorcerer. And you may be asking, why is this wood elf so goddamn big? Well, I think the lineage that Rune comes to, that we'll get into the next illustration about, has maybe some orc blood type of thing down the ancestry, and just genetics wise, I picture Rune coming from a tribe in the woods where everybody is very strong and self-sufficient, so I think the big build would just run kind of in his family. Rune himself, though, is a very quiet character. I said earlier I wanted to make a gentle giant, and that's what I did. And he is gentle. He's very soft-spoken, he's very shy, he doesn't like confrontation, and he is actually selectively mute, so sometimes he doesn't talk at all. He very much keeps to himself. As far as what I'm drawing, I decided I wanted to give him a little hobby that kind of referenced his little softer personality. So instead of a hunter or a fighter or having him doing some like insane action pose, I just decided I was going to have him carving a little statue out of wood. And the statue is of course a wolf statue because I once again leaned into the wolf motifs into his design a lot. It was something that I really liked, and I'll get into why in the next illustration. But for now, I'll just explain what I kept in his design that was really giving wolf. First and foremost, his hair. I kept the idea that I wanted his silhouette to still look very wolf even if he didn't have the whole hood thing going on, because I did keep that in his design. So I really leaned into it, and I made his hair longer, and I kind of had it flowing out over his shoulders and everything to kind of mimic what the cloak does when he has it on and still keep that same silhouette. I put a bandage over his chest because as far as casual wear goes, I think that's what Rune would wear instead of like a tunic bought from a shop, because he doesn't have that, he's out in the woods. I gave him some random natural looking accessories. I just had my Pinterest board in mind while I was drawing it, so I just was adding little things as I did. I also added this like shawl thing. It's supposed to look like it's made out of yarn or maybe twigs, but you can't really tell until the very end when I kind of render it a little bit, so just bear with me on that. This was my first illustration of the day, so I was still kind of warming up. I hadn't like adjusted to drawing yet. But I get the hang of it, and it's kind of funny that illustrations just get better and better as the character sheet goes on. And yeah, I finished up my shading and everything, and that was the first illustration of Rune in his official character sheet. Now we get into the second illustration I added to his official character sheet, and this one I wanted to do a close-up on his face that kind of gave a little bit more to his character, and I wanted to fully flesh out that wolf hood that he had because I was unsure if I was going to keep it in his design actually, but as I was drawing I was thinking about his lore, and it became very important to his story actually. So while I'm drawing this sort of close-up thing, it's mostly just the hood and a couple of other extra details. I'm going to talk about some of Rune's lore that I have so far. I've had a minimal idea of what he was going to be like, and going back to what I said kind of in the previous illustration, Rune grew up in a tribe of sorcerers in the mountains. They were very self-sufficient and self-reliant, obviously relying on the land to survive, and it was kind of expected of everybody to be these big, strong, hunter, fighter type of people. And Rune really just wasn't like that. He was really shy, he didn't like going out and killing animals, he wasn't a fighter, and he was even selectively mute. And I think it would have led to some strain on his relationship with him and the rest of his clan, especially growing up when he was younger. So I don't picture him having a great time in his childhood because of course it's one of my characters, I have to give him some angst. I think Rune would have gotten tired of sort of the mean comments and everything expected of him and would go off into the woods by himself and kind of hang out there where it was quiet and secluded and he didn't have to worry about anything, and he spent most of his childhood just by himself without really any social interaction with the rest of the people that he was around. And I picture for his storyline specifically, I wanted to lean into the whole wolf thing. I think he would have found sort of a wounded wolf maybe or something and helped him out, and they became sort of like little like friends, and you know, inevitably when that wolf grew up and died, Rune would have just taken his hide and worn it as a sign of maybe respect or a little bit of a feeling of safety. That's why I think it was an important little thing to keep. Also, it looks really cool in my opinion. I think it also adds to the fact that Rune is this very scary, imposing character with this dead wolf covering him, but he's very kind and very soft as a person. As far as designs go, I wanted to kind of flesh out this whole wolf cape thing a little bit more. The wolf is stitched up because it was hand sewn to fit Rune by himself, and, you know, he did his best. And to confront the elephant in the room, that probably wasn't an elephant to anybody else, but it is to me. Those big orcish type of teeth that Rune has going on. This is a part of his design that I really wanted to keep. As soon as I envisioned this character, I thought these teeth, but I didn't want to make an orc character. I wanted a little elven thing. And they're not only there just because his like orc ancestry that he probably has that made him like a little bit bigger than most typical wood elves. But I also added them because those mixed with the little bone nose ring that he has kind of mimics a wolf jaw in a way, how they have the upper fangs and the bottom fangs, and it kind of just nods to that part of his character. I don't know how well it reads, but that's where my mind was when I was doing that. I think I kept his color palette dark and made the wolf a black wolf because once again, it looks really imposing and he looks really scary, but he actually is just this really soft-spoken guy who's kind of intimidated by a lot of things because he wasn't really able to get well adjusted to other people and other things. And I think thinking about Rune in a campaign, that would be really fun to play around with because he'd be around all these other characters that are from completely different backstories and he'd have to cope with it. I finished up the final details on this sketch and it was basically done, and I was ready to move on to the final drawing. My mic started being weird during this whole part and I don't know what happened, so enjoy crunchy mic for about 5 minutes. Super sorry. The very last illustration I did, I decided that since he is a sorcerer, I should probably have a picture of him wielding some sort of magic. I think his specific tribe and group of sorcerers that he came from are very in tune with the earth and very in tune with that type of magic, and I think just to give Rune some main character energy in his little lore moment, I think it would come very naturally to him and very strong to him, and he can kind of just wield and possess in like insane ways that he can't really handle. And I think it gets back to his like really strong character. He's this character that has strong, unrelenting magic, but he's also very docile with it. And it's more, he's just really in tune to everything around him. Just because he's so caring and empathetic and kind of goes with what's around him. I also will admit this is inspired. I made Rune in Baldur's Gate because, of course, and there was a scene where you open the tomb and my screen went all purple. So that is 100% what this is. I also decided to add an extra detail where a part of his wolf hood, when he's using his sorcerer powers, one of the eyes kind of glows. And it also is supposed to mimic him. The wolf has a scar on his face, the opposite side that Rune does. So, kind of like two sides of the same coin type of thing. That's also why I gave him sharp nails. Everything I added was just nodding to the fact that he is wolf coated. It was also fun to just draw this huge cloak enveloping him, and it was fun to do the shadows on it. I don't see Rune as having like a weapon. He has a couple of homemade knives that I drew in the last one. Obviously they're mostly used for wood carving though, because he's a powerful sorcerer. I think he would mainly stick to spells when he would be fighting, which outside of Dungeons and Dragons campaigns would not be often. He's not a fighter. I think Rune struggles with a lot of missed potential in himself that he never really got to experience or really learn about when he was younger because he was put down by other people in his little group so often. And so I think I would consider Rune a pretty insecure character, which is once again nodding to the fact that he is so large but so small at the same time. He's kind of a sheep in wolf's clothing if you think about it. I made his face very like in awe of the fact that he can wield this magic. I don't think he would abuse it in any way. I would consider him a very neutral good or even lawful good type of character, just a good character. Which some say is boring. I think it's peak because there just needs to be some good, cute himbo characters, okay? And I'm here to deliver. I'm obviously still gonna play with his character a little bit more and add some more things. And I ended up liking how he turned out so much. I love this character so bad that I actually am considering getting with a group of other people who I know are into Dungeons and Dragons and actually trying my hand at a campaign. Once again, everything is earth themed, everything is nature themed. This boy loves nature. He just loves a leaf. He loves a tree, okay? I avoided putting anything metal or kind of like mechanic, nothing to do with like favoring technology, because I didn't want to take it out of the fact that he lives in the woods. I didn't want anything to get away from that. So even his book has wooden accents instead of like gold or silver. He doesn't have silver jewelry, it's all bone or wood. I tried my best to make it come across that he is in the woods. He almost has like an animalistic Tarzan type of vibe, but I don't really like that comparison because I don't know, I just don't. I think if you encountered Rune, he would not say anything and would stare at you like a wounded animal. So that's what I picture for my dear Rune. Adding in the shadows and lighting for this was really fun. I decided to go with a purple hue for his magic because it's a calming color and I didn't want it to look too muddy with the green. And with that, I was done with Rune's character sheet. I really like how it turned out. I think it describes his character really well and it was super fun to draw. I think this was a really fun exercise to make a character design start to finish from inspiration to final product. And it's super cool to see Rune's latest illustration compared to his first illustration. Thank you guys so much for watching if you did. I hope you enjoyed seeing me create my own Dungeons and Dragons character start to finish. Drink water if you haven't this entire video, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.